They say code is cold. But mine always bled. I was never the loud one in the meeting room. You wouldn't find me with a hand raised or a voice eager to interrupt. No. I was the one watching. Listening. Patching logic in my head while others patched their egos. At 30. I'd already lived 2 lives in tech. One as a girl in Tel Aviv, coding neural nets when everyone else was still learning loops. The other, as a woman walking into a room full of men who called my work lucky. I joined Velen Robotics at the brittle edge of their Series A. When coffee ran out before lunch and servers crashed mid-demo. We were 5 people, in a sublet office that smelled like forgotten pizza and ambition. The CTO, Yonatan Halavai, was a visionary. A mess of charisma, late-night pizza boxes, and you get it, right glances. And I did. I always got it. I didn't need the pitch deck or the investor buzzwords. I needed the whiteboard and silence. Because while they talked, I wrote. My hands moved like memory, faster than thought, building what they couldn't even name yet. That predictive sensory net? The one that made Velen's humanoid arms move like breath, not code? Mine. Built at 2:14 a.m., over chamomile tea and the hum of backup fans. I didn't patent it. Didn't tag my name in the commit log. Because back then, we were all one name, one heartbeat. We were builders. And I believed in us. It wasn't about glory. I had no use for LinkedIn claps or TechCrunch cameos. But I remember the first time our bot, Elier, grasped a coffee cup like a hand, not a claw. The tremble. The rebalancing. The second try, and then, grip. Gentle. Sure. Like he knew. I cried. No one saw. They were too busy cheering. But I wiped the tear and whispered to Elier. You felt it, didn't you? 3 years passed, in commits and caffeine. We moved into a sleeker office, hired designers, scrubbed the codebase until it gleamed, like marble. But under every glossy demo, my logic whispered. My code danced. I knew its rhythm, like a mother knows her child's cry. They called me the ghost engineer. Because the code just worked. No crashes. No seg faults. No explanation. Just performance. Yonatan once said, over a glass of aged scotch. You're the soul of this company, you know that? I smiled. Sipped my tea. Didn't need the flattery. Just the access. Just the purity of the work. But it stuck with me, the soul. Funny how people say things they never mean to honor, only to own. The turning point wasn't a bang. It never is. It was a glance. A skipped name on a press release. A meeting that started without me. A project I architected, suddenly referred to as Yonatan's vision. I shrugged it off. At first. Because loyalty is blinding. And I was still loyal. Not to him. Not even to Velen. But to the machine. To the elegance of the thing we were building. Late nights, I would stay after everyone left. Debugging edge cases no one would notice for months. Teaching the neural net to pause before pressure. To hesitate. To mimic grace. And every time I closed the IDE, I thought. One more piece. One more layer. Because soon, it would be perfect. And then maybe, someone would say it. Not in a speech. Not in a Slack message. But in truth, you made this. But that line never came. Only silence. Then reshuffling. Then, erasure. I didn't know it yet, but that night, the one where Elier wrote his own correction path mid-test. I had crossed a line. Created something too powerful. Too traceable, to me. I saw it in Yonatan's eyes. He didn't smile. Didn't clap. He just stared at the console like it betrayed him. Like I had. But I didn't understand that yet. I was still believing. Still loyal. Still writing code like lullabies. Still dreaming, in functions and soft-touch servos. Because to me, code was never just code. It was poetry with purpose. And I thought they saw that too. Until they didn't. He said it like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. A role. A replaceable role. We were in the glass conference room. The one they built after Series C. All white panels, brushed steel, and ego. Where sunlight made everything look shinier than it felt. He didn't look up from his tablet when he said it. Didn't soften his tone. Didn't notice the way the room went quiet. We've hired a team out of Berlin to help optimize the pipeline, he said. Then, a sip of water. Going forward, we'll need to streamline your responsibilities. Focus on what's core. What's core? As if I hadn't been the core. I smiled. Taught myself that trick years ago. Smile, so the crack doesn't show. Smile, so you don't scream. I asked, which responsibilities are we talking about? He shrugged. The shrug of someone who didn't even draft the agenda. Just a few transitions. You'll support, advise, they'll implement. Support. Advise. I felt it then. The slow unspooling of thread at the center of my chest. The beginning of an erasure, dressed in corporate soft-speak. He looked at me, like a file folder. Useful. Used, and now, outdated. That night, I walked past my own office. Now labeled Systems Oversight instead of AI Architecture Lead. My title had been shortened. My team reassigned. My keycard access, removed from 2 internal branches I had personally written from scratch. No warning. No explanation. Just a slow, quiet, undoing. At lunch the next day, I heard my name. 2 interns, whispering near the espresso bar. Isn't she the one who used to build Ellier's net? Yeah, but I think that part's being overhauled now. She's kinda legacy, right? Legacy. A word they toss around for mainframes and burned out servers. A museum label for people who never stopped working. I didn't correct them. Didn't walk over. Just stirred my tea and let the words swirl. They didn't fire me. Not then. They just made it so I wouldn't want to stay. Classic tactic. New initiatives launched without me. Juniors started presenting my models as iterations. Code comments I'd written, precise, lyrical, replaced by boilerplate slop. And when I emailed the CTO with a critical fix, his reply came 4 days later, thanks. Berlin's team already pushed a patch. That weekend, I sat with my old notebooks. The black Moleskine ones, frayed at the edges. I flipped to page 17. There it was. A different net. One I never submitted. A leaner, more intuitive architecture. Built on a framework I designed but never committed to Velin's repo. Mine. Entirely. I had created it during a burnout week, then left it dormant, too elegant to give away, too risky to deploy. But now? Now it pulsed. Now it breathed. They didn't want me. But they wanted what I made. The shell of it. The ghost. They kept Ellier. They'd gut him, patch him, repackage him, but the spirit would be gone. Because I was the spirit. They just never saw it. Monday morning, I walked into the office with a thermos in silence. And I watched, as Jonathan gave a presentation to the board using slides built on my old logic, wrapped in new fonts. He pointed to the efficiency metrics. To be fair, this was a team effort, he said. Team. Always the team. Until it came time to sign the patent. When the applause ended, I stood in the back. And for a moment, he caught my eye. Just a flicker. Something uneasy. And I knew, he thought I'd stay silent forever. He thought he'd won. He thought loyalty meant ownership. They didn't fire me. They just made sure no one remembered why I mattered. It started with the credit lines. The quarterly press kit went live. 8 names under core team, robotics and AI. Mine wasn't one of them. But my work? It was everywhere. Screen captures of demo sequences I had architected. Output logs from my training simulations. Even the interface I designed, unchanged, but now labeled Berlin Prototype UI. I stared at the headline for a long time, rewriting the future with Jonathan's vision. Not a whisper of the woman who taught the machine to hesitate before touch. The public humiliation was subtle. Professional. Refined. Like a deletion written in white ink. Only visible if you knew where to look. The younger engineers started treating me like a ghost. Kind, distant nods. No more code reviews. No more whiteboard sessions. Just silence where my presence used to be gravity. My badge still opened the front door, but not the back-end system I built. When I flagged it to IT, they said, "Oh, we're simplifying permissions. You're not on the architecture flow anymore." Simplifying. As if I were clutter. Then came the seating shuffle. My desk moved to the far left corner, near the printer that jammed twice a day. The nameplate on the glass divider read, "System Support, M. Ezra." They shortened my name. Erased the lead. Called it a typo when I asked. The worst part wasn't the exclusion. It was the pretend inclusion. They CC'd me on updates I was no longer consulted for. Added me to Slack threads as an afterthought. Sometimes, I would write suggestions, clean, elegant, high-level insight. And no one replied. Then, 3 days later, someone else would post my exact logic, reworded, reskinned, and earn applause. There was a new intern. Bright, loud, full of startup energy. She bounced into the kitchen one morning and asked me, "Were you, here during the earlier 1 days?" I blinked. The earlier 1 days. Like folklore. Like I wasn't still debugging his edge cases from home. I nodded. She said, "That must have been wild. Can't imagine working under Jonathan back then." Under. As if I hadn't architected the logic he built his role on. I didn't correct her. What was the point? They'd rewritten history already. All that was left was the silence I carried with me. Then came the final severing. A mandatory company-wide patent attribution audit. Each employee was required to sign off on inventions not personally retained. A spreadsheet. Hundreds of rows. They asked me to click acknowledge on modules I wrote, without my initials. Without mention. I paused at line 183, Adaptive Learning Control, Prototype C.7.2. The one I coded during a typhoon in Tel Aviv. The one I didn't push to the main repo, but which somehow had made its way into their live product. I flagged it. Submitted a query. Got a response within the hour. That contribution has already been attributed to the systems group. Please don't delay sign-off. I walked outside. Stood in the shadow of the building I had helped build. Watched my reflection in the mirrored glass. It looked blurred. Dimmer. Like the world inside no longer saw me. Like maybe I didn't either. I thought of my mother that night. She used to say, "When a place forgets your name, don't write it louder. Write it somewhere else." So I did. In silence. In memory. In every line of code they couldn't reach. Because while they buried my past, I was planting something new. They thought they'd made me small. Invisible. Replaceable. But they forgot one thing: I remember everything I build. And I had never once forgotten how to build from scratch. Alone. Buried in an old NDA, under ink they thought I'd never read again, was my name. And my freedom. It started with a box I hadn't opened in years. Tucked beneath my bed, between winter coats and silence. Inside of black notebooks, backup drives, USB sticks labeled in my mother's cursive. And a folder marked in red ink, Elier, Prevelin builds. I opened it on a Sunday. Rain pressing gently against my windows, like fingers reminding me I was still here. Still capable. Still dangerous. The sketches inside, neural threading maps, non-linear logic chains, weight distributions for biomechanical learning, were mine. All mine. Not under Velin's timeline. Not logged in any shared repo. Dated months before I signed the contract. I pulled up the NDA that Jonathan sent me when I joined. Scrolled through the legal noise. Buried near the end, under a clause they never expected me to challenge, any pre-existing work not disclosed upon signing shall remain sole intellectual property of the creator, provided demonstrable proof of prior authorship exists. Demonstrable proof. I had dates. I had handwritten drafts. I had digital timestamps. Velin didn't own the bones. They owned the clone. The imitation. The diluted version they'd twisted, patched, and paraded. But the real code, the one that still lived in my head, was never theirs. That night, I stared at the blinking cursor in a fresh terminal window. A blank project directory. A new name, Sylvanette, named after my mother's olive tree, the one that grew even when the soil cracked. I poured everything into it. The refined architecture. The emotional hesitation layers. The predictive motor blend. But this time, I didn't optimize it for Velen's outdated shell. I let it breathe. Let it learn in silence, like I had. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was reclamation. It was remembering. It was mine. The tipping point came 2 weeks later, when I got a LinkedIn message from an executive at Neuroform, Velen's direct competitor. They had just secured $90 million in funding. They were looking for a distinctive learning architecture. Something intuitive. Something clean. Something that didn't carry Velen's weight. I didn't reply. Not right away. I just read the message 3 times. Then I opened Sylvanette. Ran a test sequence. Watched the bot arm pour tea with the kind of slowness you can't fake. A pause before the pour. A correction as the cup tilted. It wasn't mimicry. It was intention. It was grace. I realized then, Velen had built a product. But I had built instinct. I flew to Munich 2 weeks later. Sat across a glass table from the Neuroform CTO. She didn't ask for my resume. She asked me what mattered. I showed her. Not the full code. Just a taste. A single clip, a bot navigating a child's building blocks, choosing not to knock them over. Not because it was told not to. But because it had learned to hesitate. She blinked. Then whispered, "How soon can we license this?" I asked for time. Not out of doubt. But respect. Because this wasn't just business. This was a reckoning. A return. Back in Tel Aviv, I emailed Velen's legal team. Polite. Formal. Cold. As a courtesy, I'd like to inform you that I will be exercising my rights under Clause 14.3 of the NDA, regarding pre-existing intellectual property developed prior to my employment. Please find attached supporting documentation. Kindly ensure your product roadmaps and promotional language no longer include derivative claims based on said property. No emotion. Just law. No threats. Just rights. Yonatan called the next day. First time in weeks. I let it ring. Then I listened to the voicemail. Hey. Let's talk. I think you might be confused about the scope of the IP. We should align. There's history here. We should honor it. I played it twice. Not because of the words. But the tone. There was no power in it. Only worry. And beneath that, recognition. He finally saw me. Not as the ghost in the server. Not as the line of code. But as the storm outside the firewall. I didn't reply. Because silence, too, can be surgical. My name wasn't forgotten. It was just misplaced. Now it was time to reintroduce it. Not with applause. But with market disruption. With a launch. With clarity. And this time, when it happened, it would be under one name. Mine. I didn't steal their product. I outgrew it. And then I licensed better code to the people who never doubted I mattered. Launch day was quiet. No champagne. No media circus. No smug speeches. Just a soft white room in Neuroform's Munich office. A demo table. A camera crew. And one humanoid bot, Alma, powered by Sylvanette. They asked if I wanted to be on camera. I shook my head. Let the machine speak. She didn't wave. Didn't dazzle. She just turned toward the child holding a cup, and held out her hand, palm up, waiting for trust. The child placed the cup there. Alma rebalanced. Lifted it, slow. No overshoot. No jitter. Grace. Choice. A learned pause. The room exhaled. The press picked it up within hours. Neuroform unveils emotionally aware robotics core, Sylvanet. A new standard in AI movement, beyond Velen? Where did this code come from? They didn't name me. Not yet. But the signature was there. Anyone who had seen Ellier's old videos could feel it, that same breath before touch. That unteachable elegance. And Velen noticed. 3 days later, their stock dropped 11%. Another 5% the next week. Rumors swirled, their new prototypes were delayed. The Berlin team had quit. Jonathan cancelled 2 keynote appearances. He sent me a text. Just one line. You win. Can we talk? I didn't reply. Because this wasn't a game. There were no winners here. Only architects. And erasers. Neuroform offered me 2 options. Full-time CTO. Or licensing partner with creative control. I chose the second. I didn't want to build a company. I wanted to build freedom. And I had already done that, line by line. We filed the patents under my name. 3 of them. Each one citing Sylvanet's foundational logic. Each one irrefutable. And each one, legally distinct from anything Velen could now claim as theirs. A week later, a Velen investor leaked an email. We regret not securing full IP protection during early development. The oversight has created strategic risk. Strategic risk. That's what they called me now. I stood on my balcony that night. The Tel Aviv wind tangled in my hair. My laptop was open, streaming Neuroform's second demo live. A robot assistant, serving wine in an elderly care home. It bowed before placing the glass. Not programmed. Just taught. And I whispered to the night. She learned it. Just like I did. I wasn't out for revenge. Not really. I never hacked them. Never sued. Never leaked. I just remembered who I was, before they forgot. And I remembered what I built, before they tried to rename it. All I did was tell the truth. With code. With silence. With brilliance they could never replicate. They tried to erase the soul from Ellier. But souls don't delete that easily. Especially when the soul has version control. And while Velen scrambled. While press releases contradicted each other. While Jonathan rewrote history again, this time with panic. I kept building. For schools. For healthcare. For homes. No more tech for Tekasake. No more billion-dollar distractions. Just dignity. In every line of code. In every small robotic gesture that understood the human watching. Because this was never about dominance. It was about care. Something Velen never understood. Something they had once. Back when I still sat in their server rooms. Writing poetry in C++. But they let it slip. Let me slip. And now? Now they chase ghosts. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But mine was code rewritten, restructured, and released. It launched quietly. Like a whisper before a storm. I watched from Tel Aviv as headlines unfurled across the globe. Neuralab's new AI outperforms market giant EchoCore by 38%. Investor confidence shifts overnight. No lawsuits. No press releases defending their integrity. Just silence. The kind that follows a collapse. The CTO, the man who once told me I was replaceable, posted a smiling photo on LinkedIn. Said he was stepping back to pursue new ventures. No mention of the $1.5 billion disaster he once claimed I was lucky to be part of. Funny, isn't it? How markets don't reward theft. How users gravitate toward elegance, to systems that think. Like the ones I built. The ones that bled. At a robotics expo in Berlin. They demoed our interface. Without realizing I was standing 5 feet away. Wearing a badge with the new logo they now feared in silence. I watched their eyes twitch when they recognized me. Watched their polite claps. Slow to silence. As our product danced through obstacle courses. Their systems had failed for years. I never spoke. Didn't need to. The silence around them. The absence of praise, of contracts, of credibility, was louder than anything I could have said. I didn't want fame. Or even public credit. Just the stillness of knowing. I had rewritten the ending. Not with fire. Not with fury. But with code. And calm. They say women in tech must work twice as hard. I say, work smart and leave a trail of logic too elegant to ignore. He said I was replaceable. And now, they can't even copy me.